Just a quick disclaimer before we start. This video is a quick filler video as I actually made this one a few months ago and it has been gathering dust ever since. I'm currently working on a Siren video at the moment and I did not expect it to be such a big video. It is huge. I have been quite busy these past 2 weeks and I have a lot on my plate at the moment. So I just wanted to post this in the meantime while I work on the Siren guide and kind of be more thorough with the video. So just bear with me and enjoy the video. Let's hop straight into it. So we all know the AoE meta. It was a good time in Warframe, but now it's gone. Well, sort of. AoE weapons left to gather dust in our treasury of weapons in our arsenals. But there is still one AoE weapon that simply said, nah. Out of all the AoE weapons that got nerfed, the Tonkor was one of the few that didn't get hit so hard. Now you may be wondering why. This grenade launcher only has one grenade in its chamber. With a maximum ammo of 30, it's really easy to sustain ammo with an ammo mutation mod. Even though it's only one shot per mag, stacking enough reload speed on this bad boy will boast more than enough damage. In this guide, I'm going to be focusing more on the Kuva Tonkor over the normal variant, as the Kuva variant has more reload speed, more crit and status chance. So it is much better. However, if you are a newer player and would simply like to wield such a weapon, the base Tonkor is an MR5 weapon which you can farm and use it until you get the Kuva version. However, be warned though, AoE weapons cause stagger. And stagger is painful to deal with, especially when you are a newer player who doesn't have the means to stop stagger. An easy fix for that is running certain frames like Rhino or Nezha, or if you are a bit later into the game, you can run Unairu with Poise. Now let's first discuss how to farm this weapon. This is a Kuva variant, meaning you will need to complete the War Within questline to gain access to Kuva Liches. I have made a guide on this a long time ago on how to farm Kuva Liches. It is still relevant in 2024, but I do want to make an updated guide on how to farm them soon. When it comes to the right progenitor for the Kuva Tonkor, I would personally recommend Toxin so you can build for viral, as we are going to be making use of hunter munitions for the main build. Now that you have stabbed a little shit who refuses to give you the right combo and you've got your weapon, let's move on to the weapon's characteristics. The Kuva Tonkor shoots out a grenade that explodes in a 7-meter blast radius, dealing mainly blast damage. Like I mentioned before, this weapon does knock you back if you shoot in the radius, but you can make use of a mod called Cautious Shot, which will make you immune to the knockback. It has a base critical strike chance of 30% and a critical multiplier of 2.5 times. It has a status chance of 17%, so it's not the best status chance weapon, so we're going to be relying on crit chance for this weapon to deal its damage. It has a reload time of 1.5 seconds, which actually is still slow for this weapon, which is why we go for reload speed on this weapon. The downside of this weapon is that the grenades have slow arcing projectiles, so if you would like to shoot further than 20 meters, you're going to have to aim quite far above their heads. And that's pretty much all the stats that you need to know. Before we go any further, if you could smash that like button, as it really helps me out with the algorithm and it really helps the video. Thank you so much. Now, with all of this info, you just need to know the following. It's a crit focused weapon, so we're going to be making use of hunter munitions, as this allows us to focus on a viral / setup. Now, obviously, because it's AoE, you are going to 100% want to make use of Primed Firestorm or the normal version as well to increase the AoE even further. Because we have gone for a Toxin progenitor, it means we only need to run cryo rounds, as you don't need to worry too much about status chance, because our slash procs will come from our critical hits, not from the status chance itself. The Tonkor has a slow reload speed, even though it may seem like 1.5 seconds isn't that long. Considering that you are shooting only one bullet, it's slow. Even with the increased reload speed from the Kuva version, so we are going to make use of fast hands or primed fast hands. If you want to, you can even make use of radiated reload, which will give you more reload speed than the normal fast hands, and it will give you radiation on top of that. I wouldn't suggest using fractalized reset, as you are going to want to make use of the flat damage increase you get from primary Merciless, and also the bonus 30% reload speed you get from that arcane. I usually don't like Merciless because of the short duration on each stack, but because it's an AoE weapon, it's not that hard to sustain those stacks considering you are killing multiple enemies at a time. This weapon needs multi-shot, so we're going to make use of Galvanized Chamber, and if you don't have Galvanized Chamber, you can make use of Split Chamber instead. When you add multi-shot with a Tonkor, one of the grenades will fly towards where you aim, and then the rest will pan out horizontally. This will further increase our AoE and further increase our overall damage, as we will now be hitting enemies multiple times. I also have opted for bladed rounds to further increase our crit damage as we make use of Vital Sense, which will mean we will get a fat 240% increased critical damage multiplier, which is huge. For all AoE weapons, ammo sustain is particularly tough after the AoE nerf, so we're going to make use of Vigilante Supplies. This is a must-have mod for this weapon and pretty much all AoE weapons. You can make use of the other ammo mutation mods by all means. I just opted for Vigilante Supplies as you have that extra chance of enhancing your critical strike chance. This is the final build here. You can also make use of the new Rifle Elementalist mod to increase your damage, and a Bane as well to increase your slash procs even more. This is the alternate build if you want to focus more damage with the Tonkor, but you're going to sacrifice Primed Firestorm. Alternatively, if you want to deal more damage to Corpus enemies as well as enemies with Overguard, you can farm a Magnetic Progenitor Tonkor. Why Magnetic, you may ask? Magnetic has been changed recently. It now does increased damage to shields up to 325% at max stacks. It will disable shield regen for enemies, and it will also do increased damage to Overguard. When the shields or Overguard breaks, you will proc an electricity proc on them that will deal electricity damage equal to 3% of the target's maximum shields or Overguard per magnetic status effect. This means it can go up to maximum of 30% damage for 10 stacks of magnetic. So when building this correctly, you can do insane amounts of damage to shielded or overguarded enemies. Here is the magnetic build for those of you who go for magnetic instead of toxin. Now for the beginners section, of course if you are a newer player, you're not going to have access to all these fancy mods. So if you don't have primary Merciless because you aren't in Steel Path, then I would suggest running Serration over bladed rounds. Running Firestorm in my opinion is nice, but not as good as the primed version, obviously. So this one is entirely up to you. You can run something else, or you can run Firestorm and wait until you get the primed version. It's totally up to you. But focus on the reload speed, multi-shot with split chamber, critical delay, and vital sense, and then hunter munitions. The Tonkor will not struggle at all in star chart if you have flat damage from Serration, multi-shot, and crit damage. That's literally all you need. Here is the full build for the newer players, plus it's cheaper on Former. Now I do want to touch on something real quick. You see, the Tonkor is a crit focused weapon. It has a low status chance and it only shoots one bullet with multiple projectiles with multi-shot. Now this poses a slight issue as you apply slash with hunter munitions and you want as many viral procs on an enemy as possible so that the bleed ticks do significantly more damage. This is mainly for the tougher targets though. The Tonkor is actually strong enough that it will one-shot most Steel Path enemies at max stacks, and usually the 1 or 2 slash procs will wipe out any enemy that survive your shots. So what we can do if you're going against tougher enemies and you would like to scale this weapon more by focusing on the bleed damage, you can either prime them with a primer, whether that's your Epitaph or Nucor with Viral, or you can make use of the Panzerwelperfiler, which is a really good option to just passively apply Viral to all your enemies. This is only if you are scaling and finding that your damage feels lackluster, but like I said, for base Steel Path, this weapon holds up incredibly well and allows you to enjoy the AoE playstyle without worrying about preserving your ammo. Now I'm not done, let's talk about what frames work well with the Tonkor. First on the list is Zephyr. Let's face it, Zephyr works well with any weapon really, but what makes Zephyr so special with the Tonkor is the synergy with her tornadoes and the AoE from the projectiles. You literally delete groups of enemies at a time, even stronger than if it was just normal AoE. We then move on to Gauss. You know where I'm going with this one. My favorite build in the entire game is Gauss with energized munitions. This turns the Tonkor from a single shot weapon to a 4 or 5 shot weapon. Doesn't sound like a lot, right? Well, if you keep in mind the fact that Gauss's fourth ability increases your reload speed drastically, it now turns the Tonkor into a pretty much automatic grenade launcher. This is one of the many weapons that Gauss works incredibly well with, but this one in particular is super fun because it quite literally transforms the Tonkor into another weapon. It's really fun. I would highly recommend trying out this build with the Tonkor. Now, of course, Gun Buff Saren makes this weapon just have stonks damage. I mean, let's face it, Gun Buff Saren, every weapon is amazing with her, obviously. This is the Saren build that I normally run, and of course it will significantly increase the damage of the Tonkor. We then have Mag, which works really well with her bubble. This is also a good option as all the enemies will get deleted inside the bubble. And of course you'll have the armor strip as well. Now for my final thoughts on this weapon. It's a really good option. I overlooked this weapon for the longest time and focused on either the Brammer or the Tsar, but honestly the Tonkor is one of the AoE weapons that barely got touched and still functions very, very well. If you're looking for a fun AoE weapon in the late star chart and even in Steel Path, then by all means the Tonkor is a really good option for you. The one downside is the stagger you get from this weapon. If you can find a way to mitigate that stagger with the few options that I mentioned, whether that's Unaru Poise or using a frame that has knockback immunity, then this weapon is going to be that much better. You're not going to have the greatest time being knocked back all the time with this weapon, so you want knockback immunity. I'm not going to talk about this any longer than I already have. Get the Tonkor if you like AoE and killing multiple enemies at a time. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, a massive thank you to the members of this channel. Your support means so much. I will see you all in the next one.